Chris, this week, well, so much happened. But out of all the announcements, whether it was GPT-4 Omni or all of the announcements, which is almost impossible to keep track of from Google I/O, we got this common line, which was a lot of these new technologies are going to be released to a small group of trusted partners. So that gave us, I think, our best idea ever since we started the show. We are officially renaming the show, people, to a small group of trusted partners, the podcast.
The logic being that every time they announce that they're giving the new tech to a small group of trusted partners, we'll be like, verbal contract, man, give us access.
So yeah, hopefully it works. But in more serious news, we wanted to deep dive into our thoughts around GPT-4 Omni and deep dive into that a little bit first, talk about the latest voice capabilities that were announced by OpenAI, and then do our best to cover the insane amount of things that Google tried to scorch the earth with at Google I/O. So Chris, I thought we'd start with GPT-4o or Omni, whatever we're calling it. GPT-4o is really hard to say first up.
Yeah,
I think.
exactly. Because you go, is it GPT-4o? It's not obviously not because it's lowercase. GPT-4o. I think it's one of those ones they're going to look back on and regret the naming in the long run. It's just going to, like the iPhone 4S, it's a bit lame.
4S would have been pretty hilarious.
That actually would have been funny. That's an Elon Musk style move, and that would have been cool.
So now you've had time to spend with GPT-4o. What are your thoughts from using it?
So the speed is hard to deny. It's the one thing you notice about it. As soon as I used it, I'm like, wow, Grok is dead, because everything you would use Grok for, this does. Like, it's really, really fast. I must say, like, Llama 3 with Grok is amazing, and I'm not discounting that at all. But the speed here just takes that out of the equation. It's so unbelievably fast.
And for those listening that don't know what Grok is, that's not the Elon Musk AI model Grok. This is the LPU cards from Grok, which essentially make inference a lot faster. And the primary model they're running right now is Llama 3, which is an incredibly impressive model. But when you get access to GPT-4 Omni at this kind of speed, it's just, you're like, well, why would I bother?
Yeah, so I immediately, a few of my sim theory agents and other projects that I have going, I switched to GPT-4o and found it to be pretty good. I've noticed people in our Discord channel have mentioned that the prompting's different and it gets slightly different results. And I noticed, for example, with the horse racing agent, that the output style is completely different. Like, it looks noticeably different. So much so that you can even switch between GPT-4 and Claude and get very similar outputs. But then switching to GPT-4o gives it formats it differently. It almost has this sort of thinking out loud style to it, where it has all this extra content before it actually gets to the answer. And I've noticed, just using it personally, like, I've tried to keep the OpenAI platform going to ask it questions throughout the day just to get a feel for it. I find that it's incredibly verbose. Like, it answers way too much in terms of what you want, which I often see from weaker models.
Yeah, it's almost like it's been tuned to improve the output style so that it was more readable, almost for the LM-SIS benchmarks. Because I think people on there tend to vote in favor of the model that gives you greater output. But I also think it could be a little bit of overcorrection in the design from the problems it had around when you were asking it to output code. It would be like, you fill in the blanks, and there was a lot of commentary around it being lazy. So I think it's probably just overcorrection now that they're trying to get it, hey, output the whole thing, but sometimes it gets confused and outputs too much where it's not relevant. Like, it doesn't seem to have that reasoning capability there.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, unless you prompt it correctly, it's one of the things Claude does, where if you just ask very simple prompts, it will explain details in the answer or details from your question that you didn't ask about. And that's really frustrating. And you've got to tune the instructions to say, hey, just answer the question. I've seen you doing that as well. You're like, just answer the question. Don't worry about any of this other stuff.
Yeah, I found that what seems to work well for GPT-4 Omni is just short, sharp prompts, like not giving it too much information, actually being lazy. And I wonder if that tuning is intentional because they saw that's how people, and we talked about this on the show last week, people like us have started to use it. We've become lazy at prompting.
Definitely. The second thing I tried with GPT-4o is the image reasoning capability. And this was really, really impressive for me. I'll take you through some of the examples I did. I had a poker game the other week and I took a photo of my chips and told it what the values of each chips were, and it was able to calculate how much money I had. I took a photo, well, actually, I got it from my wife and my shared Google Drive. So she took a photo of some like lollies at the store, like a shelf. So it was like a shelf of products along with their prices. And I asked it to produce a CSV spreadsheet of all the items and their prices, and it nailed it. I had a photo of a soccer game and I asked it what was going on in the game, and it got that right. I had a timetable, a very complicated timetable, like a roster. And I took a photo and asked it to output it in any text format it wanted to be convenient. It outputted Markdown and it was perfect. So the vision from what I've tried, which is just that plus your car example, is really, really good. The best I've seen.
Yeah, I was incredibly impressed with Vision as well. As you know, I tried the same test I always do with me driving my car, turning right at some traffic lights. And it was funny, the first time we ever got access to, I don't know if you remember, but when we first ever got access to GPT-4 Vision, we tried this test originally and we were just absolutely blown away. Like, it was able to answer my location straight away. Like, I could say, where am I? And basically inferring from the license plates and some building signs, it figured out the exact city I was in, which I thought was, pretty incredible. But what I saw with the progression of the model over time was it seemed to just get dumber and worse over time. Like, the image capability got worse, asking the same questions in various tests as we compared it to open source vision models. It seemed to get really bad, and then as GPT-4 Turbo came out a couple of tunes later, the vision also seemed to come back a bit better. But to me, GPT-4 Omni feels like what we were originally promised almost with GPT-4, or what we originally experienced in those first few weeks, where, remember, we only had like 4 chats a day with GPT-4. That's like all you could get.
Yeah.
And we were just blown away. Like, I had this feeling of like, holy shit, this thing is amazing at coding. Like, it understands everything. It was just this moment where I didn't feel like we got back with the iterations. It seemed to like they were taking it away from us. But now I feel like maybe Omni is not necessarily like this huge leap forward. It's just, the original GPT-4 essence, but trained to be, natively multimodal.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. But of course, as usual with these announcements, the what we've just described is the limit of what you actually get. Like, actually what you get is half the price. It's faster. It's unclear whether it's better or not in terms of a model. It seems okay to me. It doesn't seem like a huge leap forward or backwards, but everything else is just an announcement. And this is why we made the joke at the start about being a trusted set of partners. Like, if you want the video capabilities and the actual audio capabilities of it understanding that natively, not like voice to text, you need to be part of the elite group or you can't try it. So it's very hard to give impressions about it when we can't actually use it. It's not real yet.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of other nuggets that went into this announcement. So let's go through some of the details of it that we now know that we didn't know prior. So GPT-4 Omni was the brainchild of Prafulla Dhaliwal. He is the guy that also co-created GPT-3.
His last name is Dali.
Yeah, I looked up how to pronounce that name to try and get it accurate, and the literal indicators on the pronunciation, and I'm probably doing it wrong, so I apologize to Indian
Dhaliwal.
people out there. But Dhaliwal is how it, or I would say it based on the pronunciation. But he was the co-creator of GPT-3 and DALI too. I don't know if like that's just a coincidence. Maybe not.
I doubt he's real. I bet he's an AI.
Yeah, so he basically was the guy that said, "Hey, let's do this Omni model and essentially make it have like, be native to all these modalities. So it's got 128K context length, same as GPT-4 Turbo. The training data cutoff is October 2023. It's 50% cheaper, as you alluded to earlier, and it's dramatically faster. Now, the speed obviously varies, but as you said, like, these models are getting to the point where you just can't read as quick as it can output, so it's irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. And things like tool calling and the other things that I've spoken about before, where you often have to go to the cheaper, faster models just because you need that low latency, but they're not as good at actually making the decision. This takes that out of the equation because A, it's cheaper, so it's not this crazy expense to do. The context you need to make those decisions is smaller. And at this speed, it's completely plausible to use it in those quick decision making scenarios. So, in that sense, in the LLM app developer's sense, this is a massive leap in that stuff because it means that your application can have much lower latency, but much better capabilities in terms of tool calling, decision making, all these little things that you want to have in there that you can't afford to add, like 4 seconds here, 30 seconds here, 1 minute here, all this shit that before made it impractical. Now it's fast enough. You can chuck this thing in everywhere. And I'm starting to do that in my own programs and finding it very effective.
Do you think we just oscillate, though? I feel like week to week, based on these announcements, and even in our own apps, which shows there's like literally no vendor lock, we just oscillate between models. Like, one week, we're literally telling people, hey, if you can control an instance of Llama 3 and maybe fine tune it, maybe not, and get your prompts correct and get that fairly stable in your app, like, and it can do the job good enough, and it fulfills the use case, well, then great. Like, this is stable and it's not going to flicker around like we saw with the GPT-4 model over time. You can control costs, you've got cost stability. So that sort of makes sense maybe for a longer term application. But then on the other hand, things are moving so fast, locking down to a model like that where it's really intelligence as a service to some extent makes no sense. So, like, I don't know, like, even I struggle with this concept. It's like, that's why we have made it so easy in the things we build to just flick through between models.
Like, I think I've mentioned this before on the cast, but in sim theory itself, I actually have like a LLM directory that has all the interfaces to the different LLMs, but they all use the precise same interface as far as the program's concerned. So, for example, the ones that don't support streaming, I just simulate streaming in that code. So the other things can do it. The same with, for example, a lot of the models now have JSON parsing where you can force it to output JSON, like the GPT-4 and above have that, for example. One of the Claude models has it now. I think Opus has it now, and things like that. But the ones that don't support it, I just implement it in the sort of driver, I guess you'd call it, program. So the actual AI program can literally consume every model as if it's exactly the same. And the other thing I do is for really small models that only have, say, an 8K context window, I will chop down the prompt based on different techniques to make sure it fits in. So as far as the application developer, also us, is concerned, these things are fungible. You can just swap them out and just see how it goes. And the actual drivers themselves can do it. So you can, and we know from experience, make it very easy to switch between the models and just work with whatever's the best at the time.
We really should open source that as a library because it would be
yeah, we
pretty
absolutely
valuable.
could do that. There's nothing proprietary or that I wouldn't be willing to share in there. I mean, other than I don't like criticism and will not tolerate it in any way. Yeah.
Okay, moving on. So the other kind of nuggets that with ChatGPT that we now know a lot more on is they said that ChatGPT would have GPT-4o available without a paid plan, so without being on the Plus with daily rate limits. We can essentially infer what those rate limits are. So Plus users get 80 messages every 3 hours with GPT-4 Omni and up to 40 messages for GPT-4. This is pretty healthy limits on the Plus. And they say they may reduce those limits during peak hours. And so we can basically figure out that free would be somewhere from about 16 messages per 3 hours, based on them saying that Plus would get 5 times the limit of sorry, yeah, Plus would have 5 times the rate limiting. So 16 messages per 3 hours, it's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it's a taste test. And I think it's almost like a free trial to get more people to experience the better models with ChatGPT and maybe consider upgrading. Also, voice appears like it'll only be rolled out in a couple of weeks to paying users. A lot of people have gotten confused, including myself, that in the app right now, the voices that are being used, it's the same sort of like Scarlett Johansson-esque voice in the app was already available for some time, but obviously the new version's, much more improved, better latency. A lot of these connectivity issues, I'm assuming, have been solved. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens there to understand fully how good that is. I think it's hard to comment on until we get to try it. And then the paid desktop app, the desktop app of ChatGPT will be available to paid users first, although a lot of people have found out how to download it already and circumvent their controls there to get access early.
Interesting. Yeah, the free thing is good in the sense that more people will try it. But yeah, like they're pretty severe rate limits, so I don't know how that would go as your daily usage where you suddenly hit the limits. Like I always hit Claude's limit, even though I'm a paying user. And it's like you've got 4 messages left today, and I'm like, all right, well, screw you, Claude. I'm going to go use something else. Like it's interesting that they do it, but I guess it's the only way they can make it financially sustainable without a token based system.
Yeah, it is interesting how you just like literally just ditch it and go to the next model because they are getting close enough. Like
Yeah,
it,
like there's only very specific things where you need one that's the cutting edge, right?
it also makes me wonder, honestly, unless you're working with code, right, every day, would you even notice that big a difference in the models? Because I think some of the hardest things, like, interpreting like a huge chunk of code and rewriting it, I just find like problem solving wise, the GPTs have always been ahead. Like even when Opus came out, I still thought GPT-4 was better at coding, and that's reflected in a lot of the benchmarks as well. But I just wonder outside of that, and I'm curious to listeners who, never use these models for coding. Can you really tell the difference between Claude and GPT-4 Omni if you're able to use both? Like, I just wonder, because I've always found Claude, honestly, just better at creative writing than GPT-4
I also
Omni.
think part of it is interface and speed. Like if I'm sitting around waiting for an answer, and on Claude, for example, I think they just added a stop button this week, but prior to this week, you couldn't stop it. And so it would give these incredibly verbose answers that you didn't ask for, and then you can't stop it. And it's just enough that you tab out of the context. Like my wife was using Claude yesterday, and she was asking if there's a way you can get it to alert when it's done with all its BS, so you know that it's ready to go back to, because it's slow enough that you want to context switch and go do something else while you wait. And that breaks your workflow. Whereas when these answers are coming out faster than you can possibly read it, and then it's done before you know, you can just do your work sequentially and work with it. And it sounds trivial, but I actually think it makes a big difference to your workflow that something's fast enough that you can consume it immediately.
Yeah, like, I mean, these was like in the really early days of GPT-4, these were the sort of the speeds we dreamed of. We were like, this is when it gets really, really useful in your daily workflow. Do you think it was the Blackwell setup? Is that the latest NVIDIA setup?
Well, they've announced that that's coming out later this year, and it's really interesting if you look at the NVIDIA website in terms of their like A10 or A100 or whatever it is to H100 to H200, and then they're implying that it will more than double with the Blackwell architecture, which is their new hardware. So it's going to be called the B100, which sounds like a World War II bomber.
Yeah.
But the the level of either foresight or just agility with which NVIDIA is operating is astonishing. I mean, to go from these devices, like I remember it was only like probably 15 episodes ago where like everyone needs to buy up H100s. Now you're like, I don't want that trash. Like that's old. You want at least a H200 and then the other thing. And really there's two elements to this. One, these guys are staying ahead and allowing the big guys to train faster, infer cheaper, all this sort of stuff. But on the other hand, no one can get their hands on these things. I was thinking, like, if you could just find a way to buy some of them, there's a business just renting them out. Like, but no one, from what I can see, unless you're part of the special group of people, you can't buy these things.
But I guess back to the point around speed, like, do you think that GPT-4 Omni, they were able to like optimize and strip out a bunch of stuff and they kind of knew the hardware they were working on
Yeah, I
now?
think there's probably multiple things going on. Firstly, they're either using some sort of mixture of experts thing that's going to smaller models when appropriate, maybe. They're probably using some form of like quantization where they skip parts of the model to make it faster. But it seems to me like this shift is okay, we're now running on a new and better cluster. So the GPT-4o is running on some other cluster they've got that's tuned for this workflow. And when you look at GPUs, like everybody knows these started as for video games, for graphics processing, and what they're really good at is processing matrices and doing maths on matrices of numbers. And but the chips also over the years accumulated a bunch of other stuff like texture map stores and things that are very specific to video games, like storing data for those. Now, none of that shit is used in inference for thanks. In LLMs. So a chip that didn't have any of that stuff, which is what Grok, GROQ, did, like, is just strip all the stuff that isn't needed that isn't needed for inference, and so therefore you can make the chip cheaper and faster. So I wonder, and I notice on NVIDIA's website, for example, when they advertise their H200s and their Blackwell processors, their benchmarking, all their content is around running LLMs now, whereas it wasn't that before. It was like more generic business applications, or it was video games or whatever it was. But now they're just going, no, straight up, this is for running Llama 3. This
Wasn't
is
it the
for running.
the crypto grift before, and now it's the AI grift?
Yeah, well, that's true. I think the crypto
Joking.
people have those. They have that. Oh, what's it called? There's some sort of dedicated hardware that's more suitable for crypto, so they don't need these things.
So, do you think that the Blackwell architecture, once it's widely distributed, just destroys a single purpose card for inference? Or do you think Grok still has an opportunity just running inference?
Well, probably they do. I mean, there's got to be some sort of competition, right? And also, no one can buy this stuff, so there's clearly a market for it. Like, if it costs $100,000 per chip and you can't even buy one for ready money, then there's space in the market for other people, right? Like, it makes sense that there'll be alternatives.
Notably, they thanked the NVIDIA overlords at the end of the OpenAI Spring Update event at the end. And so that kind of might imply that because they got early access to this infrastructure, maybe that has led to the speed increase. Does that mean when like Claude and others get access to this Google Cloud, we're just going to see all of the models rapidly speed up, do you think?
Hopefully. And I want their discarded after products. I want their secondhand H100s and stuff. I want to fill my house with them, partly for heating reasons and partly for just having
Do
my
you
own
reckon they'll be
clusters.
like Aeron chairs? Those guys are driving around San Francisco with the truck of just racks of.
Don't get me started on secondhand office furniture. There is nothing more worthless in this world than secondhand office furniture. It costs $5,000 for a table, and someone won't even take it away unless you pay them.
Yeah,
Like,
that's so true.
it's got to be the most value losing proposition in the world.
So let's talk a little bit more around the implications of voice. Now, I don't really want to talk about the voice demo just yet, but I think what's interesting about Omni is obviously it was trained to be native to these modalities, similar to Google's Gemini model. But it seems to just do a far superior job. And I think they explain it really well on their website, talking about the original voice mode used to be split into these three separate, like a pipeline of three separate models. It's no dissimilar to what we've done on the show when we've
Yeah, I
done
was gonna
prank
say,
calls.
like, we've literally made this for sim theory, so I know the steps. You've got to go voice recognition, which you can either do by capturing raw audio in the browser, sending it to the server, having Whisper or some similar model decode it. And there's different levels of Whisper, remember? There's the small one, the medium, and large. depending on the accuracy you want. Then you've got to run that through inference through an LLM. Then you've got to take the LLM's output, extract the relevant piece of it, which is easier now with tool use, and then go text to speech. So that's quite a lot of steps. And if you think about it, there's HTTP overhead, assuming you're doing that. There's the, depending on where the person is, their internet connection, getting it from their browser to your server and back again. There's so many steps in that process that can go wrong and add latency. And that's the problem. In perfect conditions, it can work just fine. But there's just too many steps for it to be that sort of natural conversation flow that we saw in their demos.
Yeah, and I think what was also interesting, they said that the problem with this pipeline is it also can't directly observe, which is obvious, tone, multiple speakers, or background noises, and it can't output laughter, singing, or express emotion. These were some of the problems with it because it's not taking the audio in as like a native input. It's like it doesn't have the codec ability to natively run inference on the actual audio itself. So they said that they trained end-to-end across text, vision, and audio. Now, what's interesting is no mention of video. Like, obviously, Gemini's big breakthrough was that they also trained on video. But I guess if you've got vision and audio, you pretty much have video, right?
Yeah, well, that's true. And even if you're just taking frames of the video, which they probably are, that would be possible.
But no one's questioning their capability around video given Sora. But yeah, so basically all of the inputs and outputs are processed now by the same neural network. So you've got the singular model and you've got a better understanding. And you can obviously imagine other modalities added to this over time. Like I suspect we'll get video and some sort of spatial reasoning in there as well, like objects in place. So,
and this is almost certainly been made possible by the hardware advancements, because if you think about it, if inference is as slow as it was before, not that I'm complaining or anything, obviously, but talking about the cutting edge stuff, it can't possibly keep up. Like if it's taking in all these video and audio frames and it can't process it as fast as it's getting it, then obviously it's going to fall behind and become more and more useless as it goes. Now, you see Gemini announcing it, but simultaneously announcing they've got all these TPU, titanium or whatever it's called, Trillium chips, sorry, which is their architecture advancement in terms of the thing. And then we see on the OpenAI side, and Google for that matter, the use of these Blackwell GPUs. It makes sense that there needs to be a hardware evolution in order to be able to do things like real-time audio and video.
So let's talk now about the ChatGPT voice and just some of the bigger takeaways around that to me. I know like we can't use it, so it's like really hard to talk about it specifically, but I have a few thoughts. So I think this marks a dramatic shift for OpenAI strategically. So before, you know, they were out there saying, we don't want to anthropomorphize or whatever it is
in there somewhere.
The AI and make it seem like a person or human. And you know, early on the show, we talked about having our toxic virtual girlfriends, and it was more fun because they had memory, they got to know us, they had silly personalities, and it was more fun and a better experience working with that throughout our day than just having generic ChatGPT open. And
it apologizes before every answer or whatever.
Yeah, and I still prefer being able to shape sort of like the reply length and the personality. I enjoy it. I still like it. I feel like it makes it just more engaging and fun to work with. And there's just something about it. And through the week, even though it's not out yet, a lot of people have been using the voices all of a sudden on the ChatGPT app. And it's been going quite viral on TikTok. These people, especially women, getting the doing this like Dan hack, like not the original Dan, but a new Dan hack to get it to like sort of, you know, talk to them and be really empathetic and understanding. And they're like joking that they're falling in love with this voice because it's, you know, quite seductive. And I think also what's interesting is they chose to basically, I mean, they already had it, but they have this like Scarlett Johansson-esque voice out of the movie Her. and it's very flirty, and it just marks, I think, a huge shift in their strategy. They're starting to embrace this idea of this personalized companion that actually does feel somewhat and act like a real person or a colleague, instead of like this is your sterile co-pilot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But do you think out of this that I've always thought the success of something like character AI was because people genuinely do enjoy it, this digital companion feeling like a real person. And I kind of get the feeling that this is why they lent into it so hard, because they want you to build a connection with this digital companion. I think that does a few things. I think firstly, it creates vendor lock-in, because as it starts to form a memory and a relationship with you, it's hard. Like, you're actually like breaking up with your AI assistant. You're like, oh, sorry, I'm going to go use Claude now. It's like, this thing just becomes a natural connection that you have. Like, you form such a strong bond with it that maybe you don't want to switch. So I think that's like one angle to look at the
And I think that's
personality.
real. I think regardless of how you think about that in terms of life and humanity or whatever, it's undeniable that as it gets to know you and answers questions, you form an attachment to it of some kind, even if in terms of just utility. It's like it's more useful to me when it knows a few things about my preferences and what I want and how I want to be spoken to and the kind of answers I want. Like, all of that is sort of like a proprietary knowledge graph about you. Like, it is useful.
Yeah, it's funny. I have previously and have recently again given my son access to the voice capability. And we started the first episode of this podcast ever, if you go back, where I was talking about how he just expects these custom Batman stories every night now from AI. And now he just expects to be able to talk to the computer girl. He's like, just ask the computer girl. And that computer girl has become the voice chat on the app. And sometimes I'll sit and just like literally watch him having a conversation with it. And he can just ask anything and explore, anything he's interested in. Like, he was asking it about, where did sharks evolve from? And does she have a brain? And like asking a bunch of questions, and just the natural interaction of learning through this voice. I think that's this aha moment that's come out of all of this. And then you've seen the demo with the Khan Academy guy and his son doing the lesson on the iPad. Admittedly, I think that was a bit of one of those cherry-picked demos. Like, if you watch closely in the demo, he changes the color of the pen when indicating, like, it's clearly rehearsed, the demo, to make sure it functions correctly. But I think this voice, or this voice capability, is definitely some huge breakthrough in education and learning. And
Well, I had a dinner party last night and I was talking about this very topic. And it was interesting because we were talking about children using it. And then someone pointed out, part of the reason why kids like it so much is they can't spell, they can't write the words to ask the questions. Like, if you're a 6-year-old, you can speak a lot better than you can write. And so for them, it's a much more convenient interface. Like, not only do they have something that they can ask any question of and it'll answer, but they actually have the ability to use it.
yeah, you can totally see, like, my kids already interact with the Google Home all the day to get what they want, because they can. Like, they can turn lights on and off. They can do all sorts of things. They can open our garage with it, like, so it does. It gives them, it's basically like an accessibility tool there as well. But,
I would imagine there's a lot of people at different stages of life and in different stages of society who, I'm not calling them children, but like, not everyone is completely literate. Not everybody has the ability to interact with a computer the way we do. And giving them that ability to have like all the world's knowledge like that is pretty powerful.
So we obviously saw the capabilities from ChatGPT voice, and we covered a lot of that on our live episode we did, or at least our initial reactions to that. I still don't really want to go deep on it until we have a chance to experience it for ourselves, because don't really understand the point of talking about something we can't actually use. And I'm hoping they roll it out fairly quickly. But we also saw out of Google I/O, and we'll cover more updates from I/O later in the show, this demo also. And let's be honest, they were both just demos. I think the OpenAI one was arguably better because it was a live demo and everything Google did was a video. But Google I/O's Project Astra, they call it. And Project Astra is similar but different. And I really, the one demo that caught my attention, speaking of this voice platform and education and how this could change things, was a game of Pictionary they had as a side booth demo at Google I/O. Now, this wasn't even covered in the main keynote, which just absolutely threw me, because I think this is by far the most exciting demo I've seen. Like, this demo looks like the future interface of computing to me. Like, this is probably it. And I want to really talk about this more, but let's watch the demo first.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. That was really good.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
What do you think is happening to the Apple right now? What do you think is this?
The apple is getting eaten. Are you adding another object, or is it just the cat and the apple right now?
No, there's something to the Apple. What do you think that is?
A worm.
Yes.
Is that
So for those listening, I know this is hard, but he's got a picture of an apple on a screen. Imagine playing like Pictionary on a tablet on a screen, and there's an apple on the screen, and he draws a worm going through the apple, and he's talking to it in real time, and it's able to visualize what's on the screen. And then there's that inflection in its voice, like, it's a worm. And
I must admit, there's something beautiful about the way it is delighted. Like, it's almost like a childlike wonderment in the voice. Like, that's really, really good.
yeah, and so Project Astra was sort of, I think obviously their big reveal that was planned. And then you've got ChatGPT voice. It's like they both came to the same conclusion on where this is going. And let's be honest, depending what generation you're from, you're either trying to build a Star Trek computer, or you're trying to build the Her thing, or that thing out of that my kids like, the robot out of Iron Man, Jarvis. So to me, that's like, that's sort of how people envisage the future. But I think this was like the first real look at the future interface of computing, and probably what we can expect from future updates to Windows and Mac OS X. It'll probably take them 1 or 2 years to get there, but you can imagine this like omnipresent computer that's always looking at your screen, taking in all the inputs, modalities, maybe even sound from the room. And that has a lot of benefits, as was demonstrated from this event as well. Like, it can literally remember things. Like, one of the demos of Project Astra, she's walking around the room and she's like, where did I put my glasses? And it's like, your glasses are on the table over here. And it has that context and memory.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because one of the most inconvenient things about using multimodal AI now is getting the information into it. It's like, yeah, I've got documents and I've got images and audio I'd like it to work with, but I've got to find the friggin' files. I've got to like get them in the right format, find out where to upload them, then ask my question. It's just not worth it. Whereas it's this passive context gathering that actually makes it valuable in those real world contexts.
Yeah, I'm certain voice plays a big role in the future of this, like being able to interact with someone like it's a coworker. I'm sort of torn a little bit, though. I think in the workplace, in a lot of workplaces, you're not going to want to speak to some assistant all day, but still, if it's omnipresent and listening and seeing, then,
Well, and there's also, like, just because you don't speak to it doesn't mean it can't speak to you through headphones or something. Like, you could definitely have it gathering the context and you're just typing to it and it's replying in voice or not, or whatever it is. Like, the context gathering can still apply even without the voice interaction necessarily.
But to me,
Makes it
this
fun.
does mark, and like, if people don't believe it, I think it's one of those things where, you have a hard time imagining the future. Like, I'm sure when everything was like desktop PCs and mobile came out, I mean, I lived through it literally, and I lived through all the way from BBS to the internet coming, and it's like sort of hard to imagine that future, but I think now it's pretty obvious that the future of computing is like this omnipresent operating system that
Yeah, I was talking last night at the dinner. I was talking. My wife was saying that when she was a young girl, she was so afraid that we were living in a simulation that she used to cry to her grandmother like every night about the fact we're living in a simulation. I'm like, how the hell did you come up with that theory when you were a kid? She's like, oh well, we had a computer. I'm like, you had like a 486 desktop thing that could barely play bloody Snake or something, and you're crying about the world being a simulation. That's incredible foresight.
yeah. That's a pretty hot take from someone using a 486. But I guess my point being is like this is a platform shift. Like this is actually a platform shift. How that shift is delivered now is all that really needs to play out. And the question is, and this is sort of the thread I already observed to ChatGPT voice, even though these guys are the only ones sort of shipping the future, in my opinion, right now, and they do deserve credit for that. The other guys have like if you look at Google, they've got real-time sources of information. They've got a suite of tools that people are using in the workplace. They've got Google Workspace, which pretty much nearly 50% of businesses are using. The other half are using Microsoft, right? They own somewhat the hardware, sort of through Android, but they've got the distribution down there as well to have this computing. But then I would say the two biggest players are definitely your Microsofts and Apples here, like where, you know, you might have the Apple version of this where, you know, they pivot Mac OS X into this full like omnipresent OS, and Windows does too. And then really then OpenAI is just a technology provider. But they've very cleverly, at the moment, inserted themselves in the middle. It sounds like they've done a deal with Apple, and they're obviously in bed with Microsoft. So, I don't know. I feel like if you own the hardware and you own the distribution, eventually you're going to catch up on this technology, and those guys will probably still be able to win the future here.
It's interesting. The other one that was part of the announcement with the Google thing I found interesting was them talking about the future of search and how they've got this thing, I forget what it was called, but where it would give you answers rather than search results. So you would ask it a question and it would just answer. And I've noticed in my own life and other people I see around me sort of use Google for that now. And Google is already doing that to some degree where it will give you like answer to your question as well as the results. And I couldn't help but feel like if you're like a regular website that it's scarfing this information from, how are you going to feel about that? You do all the work, Google takes all the credit, and you don't really get the click-throughs or anything anymore. I mean, it's already the case where a lot of the results on Google are total junk and like blog spam. It's just the whole nature of search is just going to completely change in the next couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's this realization it has to for them to stay in the game and in the business. But yeah, we can talk definitely more about that, especially the Google I/O announcements. It felt like it was truly, like spray and pray there in terms of what they were doing. I did want to touch back on the voice because we joked at the start about the idea of a selected group of partners, but it does seem like the voice technology or that voice modality of being able to produce voice as well as like take in the audio in that real-time nature is something that OpenAI are going to provide through their APIs. So
yeah, and I wonder what implications that has. There's several startups around that, like retail, which we covered before when we were doing the phone calls. There's another one I discovered during the week through Grok called VAPI, I think it's called VAPI or something like that. And it like Grok is having some competition where it's like build your best application using voice, using this VAPI thing. And it's interesting because if the models themselves support voice input output natively, then these startups are just plain dead because they're definitely doing it where it's a multi-step process using Whisper. And I know this from their documentation. So it's guaranteed to be worse and slower. And
yeah, this is what I don't get here. And I mean, Sam Altman has accurate. Like, he's been very accurate when he said a couple of times, "We will steamroll you." What he's talking about is the specific.
He's such a bastard, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's talking about the specific modalities. Like, he's saying, like, if you're just specializing in a certain modality, these are all going to become a part of the generalist model, and therefore,
Of the Borg.
yeah, like, we are going to like consume you. But then I argued with you before the podcast that, like,
Sorry, I just thought OpenAI resistance is futile.
literally, that they should
That'd
make
be
that their
fun.
slogan.
I'd love a truly evil company to just be open about.
Yeah, that they're openly evil. Maybe that's what the open stands for now. But yeah, now I've lost my point. The UDIO. So, like, going back to that, like, it's so much fun. I've been listening to a lot more music on it, and I have a special song I want to play you at the end. And I promise
Nice.
to listeners I will play it in full.
And also vote in the comments if you'd like us to switch to an all music podcast where we just make songs on UDIO and just play them. Would that be better content? It was funny because one of the guests last night, they stayed pretty late, and I was
I
like,
swear the show's turning into a review of your dinner party.
It is. And he was like, I said, you can just stay and be a guest on the podcast. And he's like, do you want like hot takes and uninformed opinions? And I'm like, that's what our podcast is. So yeah.
What were we talking about now? So UDIO. So like, let's talk through the modality here. This is like obviously a specialist music model. It's by far the best. I don't think anything's close to it. The music on it's great. The songs stay in my head, right? Like, they're catchy.
Yeah.
And these guys are just like solely focused on that modality sort of. And then you've got Midjourney, obviously far superior in image generation still. Maybe the new image output from Omni is better. We don't know because it's still kicking back to DALL-E 3 from what I understand right now, and we haven't really seen that. And there's all these other skills that Omni has that they really didn't even talk through. But I guess, yeah, it makes me wonder because I think, like, it's not like you go to... I don't know the best analogy for this, but it's not like you go to some everything app to consume music today. Like, you go to Spotify because it's the best music player. I wonder if the future of maybe the apps that are running on this new omnipresent OS or whatever we're calling it, like, it still have these specialist elements to it. It's just really hard to understand because then if you think this stuff does exponentially get better and somewhat run away, I know there's a lot of debate around that things might plateau, but, does that mean that these companies are all dead or do they have a place? And I still see a future where all of these things will have a somewhat of a place. Maybe not like the audio startups. I think the voice startups might be in a bit of trouble.
I think the biggest challenge facing the major players, so like Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, maybe to a lesser extent, is privacy of data. I honestly think that is the biggest challenge they're all going to face because they've already managed to erode trust by like I think, didn't you tell me this morning that Slack made an announcement that unless you opt out, they're using all your messages to train on?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to break trust, that's a good way to do it. It's like, all that private crap you write in your messages, we're using that for training unless you opt out, even though you're a paying customer and have been for years.
It's truly mental.
It's outrageous. And so I think that I've personally seen through a lot of people this, no way they're getting my data. Like, I'm not using it for anything real because of that.
Well, and also the counter to my future OS argument is like, do you really want an AI watching you and observing you all the time? Like, what about when you're doing stuff you shouldn't be doing? Like, I don't know if people want to be observed by a computer all the time and watched.
Well, I mean, there's already those home monitoring apps for people who work at home where it's checking that they're doing their work at all time. They've existed for a while, and this is just a more comprehensive version of that. I see advantages if I'm the one operating it and I can control its parameters and what it's alerting on. But yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, which makes me think that it needs to be secured at like the hardware level. Like, everything needs to be local for this to be trusted, especially in the enterprise.
And so I think back to your point about like, should other people bother? I think when we see a lot of the open source replications of the various model things, there is a place for those because people are going to want to operate this on premises hardware for privacy reasons, I think. And I think a future of a lot of it is like, we saw even with the Google thing, they announced on Android AI inference with a small model. And I think there's going to be this concept of some things are local when it comes to privacy and some things that's fine that can go off to the cloud.
Yeah, my personal opinion is this stuff will take a lot longer than they think, and there's going to be a golden age for developers in the next 5 years where they're just infusing AI or creating like AI versions of everything we have today, and those will be all like I just am starting to see GPT-4o or the latest OpenAI model as the platform. Like that is the platform. It's not Mac OS X, it's GPT-4o is the platform, and you're building these applications to extract value and show and demonstrate people use cases out of it. For example, I said to you earlier in the week, I was like, someone should make an AI, like AI in a box or like a redirect for like doctor offices where I call and they're like, sorry, one moment, and put me on hold for an hour. Like an AI could easily like help me schedule an appointment now with these new voice capabilities. And I would much prefer it, to be honest. So like there's all of these places that society will need or can benefit from this stuff being infused. And I think that really the next sort of maybe 3 to 5 years is going to be this golden age where developers can go and infuse this tech everywhere and make a lot of money. And also, really change the world by baking it in everywhere, similar to like how mobile changed everything. Like we have our license, our bank cards, our banking on it. I think we'll see a similar shift here, and that's...
Yeah, and I think for each technology, it's about, I think infuse is a good word because it's like, put it in a context I'm actually likely to use it. Because there's some things where like, we know it can do it. Like there's so many times I'm out and I want to demonstrate AI's capabilities to someone because we're talking about a specific topic and I'm like, oh yeah, it can definitely do that. But I have no way to show them, like literally no way I can possibly demonstrate it in the situation that you're in. And I feel like that is a big part of how does the AI stuff get into the real world context where it's actually useful, versus just these latent capabilities that exist in the models but aren't being commoditized.
Yeah, because I think the perfect example of this is imagine like the new Mac OS X in 2 years from now. It's like, I don't know if this word's lame or not, but like this omnipresent where it can see everything. It's got all the modalities. It's super smart. It's able to have this great recall memory. So you can be like, hey, what was that thing I was looking at again 2 weeks ago that I spent a bit of time on, and it can recall that. Cool. So let's say it can do all that now. Like, the world just doesn't change that quick. Like, I'm still going to have to call my doctor's surgery, and they're going to be like, just hold for a minute, even if they're using
yeah, I know what
shit.
you're saying.
So to me, the opportunity for people, if this is something you're thinking about, is like, how do I go and put all this stuff out there in the real world? How do I go and build these apps that people can consume? And to me, the best play for OpenAI, like if they want to really dominate this and be the platform for app builders, is to just give, like, and I think they're probably going this way with like sign in with OpenAI, but it's like, forget this GPT bullshit. Just let people submit apps they've built on top of GPT-4, like the doctor's surgery example. List them in a store, give them icons, and then have a single sign-on and single payment billing capability through OpenAI's interface. And all of a sudden, like, you've created this new sort of like weird OS, which is everything's built on GPT-4o, like it, or whatever's next. So that feels like how they could be helping in terms of like a store right now, instead of like, the laundry buddy shit that we, sorry. The censorship's a little bit late, but it works. Anyway, that's my rant. I just think that these people that are like, oh, like throwing in the towel and AGI tomorrow and all this stuff, like, I don't know. I feel like I've seen this pattern before where, there's going to be this period at least that's very predictable where it kind of goes through this hype cycle, and then the technology becomes available, but now we've got to do stuff with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the apathetic response that some people have is just fear. Like, I think if your response to all the AI advancements is apathy, I think it's just because you're scared that you're going to miss something that um that will change the world, and you just don't believe you can do it. And I think the antidote to this, for me at least, because I go through that as well, the antidote for me is trying it. Every time I go and try the technology, it really grounds me, let's say. And I know I stole you saying that earlier, but it reminds me that there's a long way to come in terms of actually applying the technology. And we can be excited about it and think about the future, while realizing that in terms of actual infusion into the real world, it's not even close yet.
So now let's go full scary. Like, I want to go like cyborg shit here. I watched that Astra demo, and for those that haven't seen it, I encourage you to go and watch the Astra demos. I'll play a brief one now just so you can hear the voice and get a feel for it, and then I'll carry on with what I'm going to say.
Hey, I'm going to show you some objects. Just do your best to remember them.
Sounds fun. I'm ready. I'm pretty good at remembering things, so go ahead.
Bragger.
She's
Okay
a bit
then,
arrogant. Yeah.
name every object I just showed you.
Okay, let's see. There was a seashell, a crab figurine, a
Okay, and she goes on to list, see, I'm already doing it, goes on to list like a bunch of stuff that was in it. And what I don't get about all of these demos, right, is OpenAI's a bit better. Google's definitely the worst. But all of the demos of this technology, none of them seem to have any practical use apart from everyone calling out every time I say this, oh, it's good for blind people. Sure. But
the blind community's just happy.
Yeah, they were. It's a good time to be blind. But my point here is that, okay, if you really want to use these memory capabilities in the real world, this thing has to be your eyes. Like, it has to be your eyes. Or you've always got to have glasses on, or you've got to be holding up your phone all the time. You're not going to do this. So I guess my question...
What is this? It's like, it's your lounge room.
It's always a plan. Like, I'm going to compile a compilation for everyone. I'll have it next week, of all the companies, including Rabbit, Humane, sorry. There's so many AI companies, Hume and Humane. But Humane, that chip that goes on you, the Rabbit R1, the Project Astra, and the ChatGPT voice app, or whatever they call it. It needs a name. Or it's like, what is this plant? Like every demo, like that's like, who cares? Like, does anyone care?
Maybe that's a future career, is like use case idea generator. It's like, I've got all this cool stuff that I spent billions of dollars making. Do you have any ideas of like what I could use it
We've
for,
invented an API for AGI. Do you guys have any ideas how we might use this?
Yeah, I still can't wait for that day when OpenAI announces the AGI API and everyone's making Laundry Buddy v4. And like,
it's gonna happen. There's gonna come a day where it is sort of it crosses the borderline, and who knows when that'll be? Like 50 years maybe. But there is gonna come a day when it crosses the line and no one knows what to ask.
Yeah, do my dishes. That's probably the main thing.
It's that whole like the most hilarious outcome is the most likely or whatever argument. But anyway, back to the point around this to make it a bit more serious. Like, how does this actually, what's the end game here? And I'm curious in the comments, if you have an opinion about this and watch on YouTube, tell me what you think the end game is. Like, are we just going to become cyborgs? Like, is that the end game? I think it probably is. Like, there's a chip, it just sees through, it just works off our visual cortex. Like, it just takes a feed of data in.
It is a logic. I mean, assuming the technology is possible, it is a logical step that because we spoke about this before, like it would make sense for AI communicating with AI to use a much more terse format than language, like our English language, or let's say, I know it can do other languages, but like it would make sense for it to have the most energy dense, let's say, language possible, because the other side can understand it, like compression, let's say. So therefore, for us, the fastest method of communication we really would have is thinking. So if it's able to translate your thoughts into something that it can understand in terms of its neural net, then that would be the most efficient by miles. So it makes sense that they're going to try this, especially with things like Neuralink, assuming that's not BS.
I think the highest bandwidth is definitely vision, though. That's why if you're in the car and you're trying to concentrate, you always instinctively turn down the audio because you're trying to stop the feed of audio in to dedicate more resources to vision, according to the brain book I read.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Because I always do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just literally you're trying to get more bandwidth to process vision and react to it. And so, like, thinking along those lines, it seems to me like having this native vision modal, and by far OpenAI is the best at that right now, as far as we can tell. It's really about collecting more vision data from humans. So it's like, that's where I think glasses definitely help. I mean, I love those Meta Ray-Ban glasses, but I don't wear them all the time because I don't want to wear glasses inside. And I don't really like the idea of always being strapped to my computer. And then second of all, like, no one's going to hold up their phone. So you've either got to go down the robotics path of having the things actually walking around, taking in the data. And we obviously learn way more visually because that's how kids learn early on. So that the vision modality seems like a big input source or a big training source of data, moving from like static photos that we've taken with our phones to actual video clips. And it's like, well, Google's got the YouTube repository, which I'm sure OpenAI just scraped anyway. But then again, you're like, well, maybe Tesla here is a big contender in the future because they've got the cars driving around getting all the vision.
Yeah, and like you just made me think as well. Like, imagine you've got your Ray-Ban glasses on, and it's like augmented reality, and they can make that fast enough that it works at the speed of the vision models, right? Imagine like an annotated world. Like everywhere you go has annotations on it. Like like what this thing is, its history, like all this shit everywhere you go. Like, and then doing that from childhood. Like, let's say there's some messed up future where that happens. I wonder if it has the effect of you learn more, or it has the effect of you learn less because you never actually have to retain any knowledge because you're just constantly being told.
Because it's your memory, and like you just have all the knowledge.
Yeah, like for example, if you take testosterone, your body stops producing it because it doesn't need to. Like, I wonder if as we live in an annotated world, is if we just simply stop needing to remember anything because it just does it for you.
But don't you think you're already like that with your phone? Like, I take photos of things now I need to remember, and then I go, and I'll get to this in a minute because it's a pretty good breakthrough, and then I just search in Google Photos for that thing in that time to find it. And that's how I like remember stuff now that I know I'll forget. And like spelling, I can't spell anymore. Like, I'm really dumb without my phone.
Okay. You've lost the ability to spell.
Yeah, but I guess what my point is like, does it go cyborg, or does it go, where you get so into augmented reality and it's such a good use case that everyone just straps something to their face? I have a hard time imagining how we get there, but it seems like...
Well, I mean, you would have a hard time imagining, except if you ever been to like a train station or bus stop lately, like every single person is staring at their phone. Like, it looks like something Futurama would have parodied 10 years ago, but it's real. Like, every single person is on their phone now. Like, if you could try to go up an escalator, everyone's blocking the way because they're all staring at their phone. Like, it kind of makes sense that if you can go one step further and just put the phone in your brain, that people are definitely going to.
Can you imagine the live demo? It's like, here we're drilling into the brain and putting the chip in. Now I know what plant this is. Like,
yeah, yeah, that's right. Exactly. Where did I leave my glasses? Let's play Pictionary. But there's an episode of Star Trek called The Game where one of the guys goes to a planet and brings back this like headset you put on, and the whole headset is like playing a game, putting a ball in a cup that gives you like an endorphin release every time you do it. And it's a mind control device, and every single person on the ship ends up getting addicted except for Wesley Crusher, who with this attractive girlfriend of his saves the day. I think she became a famous actor. I forget who it is, but you can look it up. Anyway, it's quite similar to what phones are now. Like these people who wrote these things really had good foresight as to what's coming. And I can seriously imagine a future where people are more than happy to integrate this directly into their bodies.
What's the bet when this chip does go into your body? they're like, it makes you more human again because it gets your phone out of the way. That's going to be the pitch, right?
Well, I mean,
Like-
you're probably right. Yeah, it's like stop looking at your phone all day. You can now mindlessly scroll through Twitter in your brain directly.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it seems like the context window, and something Google announced was this idea of context caching, which I'll get you to explain. But they said that at the Google I/O event, they announced that Gemini 1.5 would eventually, sometime in the future, maybe have a 2 million context window. And then they were rolling
Well, no,
out.
I think they have it. You just can't access
Yeah,
it.
you can't access it. But I mean, that's what I mean. Sometime
But
in the future.
As much as that's cool and everything, but 1 million to 2 million, I don't know about you, but I struggle to think of what use case is possible with 2 million that isn't with one.
But I guess
Like-
this is what I'm saying. I think these large contexts is for this Project Astra, right? It seems very connected. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you're going around holding up your phone, trying to figure out where you left your keys, recording every moment, and then... Sorry.
Such a great use of energy resources.
Yeah, like all those GPUs going... "Brrr. Where are my keys?"
Billions of dollars worth
like-
of hardware.
You realize we have air tags, you morons. Yes, oh, God.
Just put them in a bowl.
I live in a post-key world anyway, and I couldn't be happier. Yeah, but I guess like it's clearly these context windows are increasing, and I think one of the major benefits of those context windows increasing is it being able to
Wastefulness.
observe wastefulness, and also being able to.
The who gives a shit strategy to prompt engineering. Just friggin' put it all.
I don't
in
know
there.
how anyone that listens to this show can take us seriously, because we started off quite serious about announcements, and now we've descended into why is any of this meaningful?
Yeah, who cares, man? Let's all just go live in the forest.
Oh,
I'm
we should have
only
been a
half
crypto
joking about that.
podcast.
Let's talk about the context caching though, because that is a really interesting announcement that was slipped in there. So what it is when you're working with, let's say you're having an ongoing chat with an LLM and you've been iterating on a piece of code, or you've posted in like an entire case history for a law case and the affidavits of the people and like all this information that's relevant to you asking questions, where it absolutely must take into account this context when answering your question. So where accuracy is important and you've got all this background information. Now, let's say you have 1 million tokens, you put the entire In Search of Lost Time novel in there and you want it to help you write an essay. Every single time you prompt it, you've got to send through that thing. Now, OpenAI has its assistance model where you can have persistent conversations and it will have it in there. But the idea of context caching would apply so well when it comes to that sort of memory, because you would simply include that in the context cache. And I know a lot of people say cache, sorry, by the way, I say cache, and store it in there. Then you just ask subsequent questions and it's already loaded all of that information. So instead of it presumably having to process that information every time, it has it in a more intermediary style loaded state where it can just access that and just answer the next question. So it'll be faster, it'll be cheaper. And I think really the speed element to it is really good, because it's like, okay, instead of me having to be economical with the context I give it, I know that it has it there and I can work within that context to get a really fast and accurate answering system. Like it's a very, very good concept when it comes to these larger prompts. And like, for example, in sim theory, a lot of the code is actually around deciding how much of the memory do I give it. So for example, part of why when you answer a question, it's sometimes slow is that I actually give it the opportunity to look up memories. It's like, here's a list of the stuff you have in your memories. Let's say it's a court documents, a reference thing, a news article, whatever. Here's a list. Now, based on the question you've been asked, which of these would you like to access? And then it can decide to do that. And that can either be accessing the entire memory or using RAG to ask that memory a question. But when you have this idea of such a large context window that can be all stored in memory and just kept there hot, ready for you to query, nothing that I mentioned is necessary. You just don't have to do it. You can just ask it directly. So it's another thing where this getting closer to or what us humans would consider real time is possible with high accuracy. So I think that's a major paradigm advancement. And I think it could be really, really good for applications like we've built and that others are building.
So does that mean you could, in theory, like preload a cache into the model? Like, say you go back to your agent right now on Sim Theory, is like, this is the best example I can think of.
Yeah.
And you want to like preload all its like memories and all the sort of things that make it itself.
Yes.
You're basically at the start of that going, hey, here's all the crap, and then it just remembers the whole time instead of you
And then
resetting
you
it.
just simply have a conversation with it. And so it's a similar process now, except you're providing all of that information every time you query it.
It just seems like Google's releasing a series of tools, which I'm sure they are publicly, that they're using to build this Project Astra, which they've always dreamt of internally. I mean, they've had this idea long before OpenAI even existed. I mean, there's so many examples of it. I cited the one from 2016 where, you know, it called a restaurant and made a reservation. I think there's elements of that that are going to happen next, like the LLMs actually doing things for you. Google asked us at I/O to imagine agents in the future. That was a beautiful segment, the imagination section. What an inspiring CEO. But it still feels to me like while Google have great things like long context windows, this memory caching, and you know, they've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of interesting sort of tech demos, but it just seems like OpenAI are the only ones that can execute with that like curated model that sort of works how you expect and has been massaged and like focused on. Whereas it feels like Gemini is still very slapped together. Like it doesn't have like a coherent focus or something when you use it. And it seems to just suffer from so many. Like I retried Gemini Advanced because it now has the 1 million context for paid users after it came out. And I don't know, I tried to use it for the day and it sucks. I don't know why I don't like it, but it's not the interface. I actually think OpenAI is currently with ChatGPT copying a lot of the good elements of the interface in Gemini, but I don't know, it hallucinates like mental. The tools in it are unusable. Like I asked it to produce a chart just to see if it'd improve in that area. And like a few other things in it. It's like, according to this NASA data, because I asked it about like global temperature changes and to graph it, just because I thought that's an interesting case that Google can do, because they can go and pull it from some search data that's fresh. And it was able to find the data, right? Like the search element's great, but then like it just hallucinated the answer. Like the graph was just a complete and utter lie. And I'm like I went and did the same sort of experiment in ChatGPT and it nailed it. Like there was no hallucinations. Like it felt better to interact with. And I'm sure they can get there, but they have a lot of work to do. And it just seems like Anthropic and OpenAI are just far better at sort of like massaging the model to be like how you would expect it to behave.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like in Gemini's defense, I'm sure with correct prompting and grounding and other techniques that we know about, you could get good results out of it. Just like with Phi 3 from Microsoft, a tiny model that has no knowledge, you can get excellent answers out of that if you know what you're doing with it. But I think what you're saying is these mainstream large models like GPT-4o and Claude Opus are just more tuned to, I can just ask it a question with no context and it can get it right the first time. Like we've talked about lazy prompting before, where I will just literally copy paste some random pile of crap and it will know what I want from that pile of crap. Like
yeah, you can't underestimate the experience OpenAI and Anthropic now have with all the interactions that people are having with them on a daily basis. Like they understand what people want from their model. Like if you go back to earlier in this episode, we talked about how it felt like GPT-4 Omni had been tuned to our lazy prompting style to get a better result. And I'm like certain the latest tune, that's what they aim for, was like this feeling of like you can be a bit lazy with your prompting, which is why people's long prompts are now failing. I'm almost certain. And this other tune where it's like, just give me all the output. And I think they've overcorrected there. But it also makes me wonder if like you'll have your own slightly tuned versions in the future as well. Like your own local model will be able to retrain itself to tune to your preferences. Like,
well, this is the fear, right? Like if you build your stuff around these public models, they can change, they can rug pull at any time and do on a very regular basis. Like this is a good argument for Llama 3. It's almost as good and it's not going to change.
yeah, and there's devs like literally on our Discord today being like, all of my prompts are failing or not giving the correct
that
output.
on Discord. Yeah.
So you're right.
Join
Like
the Discord, by the way.
yeah, there is that rug pull element. Anyway, we probably should go through like the spray and pray updates from Google I/O. So let's go through them pretty quick because I think they're not that, like, some of them aren't interesting, some of them I think are more exciting. So one you tried out is this Pali Gemma. Am I saying that right? Pali Gemma.
Yeah, the language vision model. I don't know if I was using it wrong, but it's not great. Like of all the vision models I've tried, like some random model from 2 years ago on Hugging Face is better than this thing. I tried lots of different images on there. First of all, it's interesting that it only gives one-word answers to stuff. Like I tried your car demo and I'm like, what will happen if I accelerate? And it's like accident. And I'm like, okay, yes, accurate, but not really what I was looking for. I was like, where was this taken? It's like, I can't answer that. Like most questions I asked, it was like, I can't answer that.
Sort of
So
weird because it says in the documentation it's meant for conversational use too, and then it was returning a single
yeah,
word.
and they did release 4 different versions of it, and I only tried 2. So I may not be giving it a completely fair test, but everything I tried was disappointing to say the least. It really wasn't something, and in this world of there's like 5 of these models released per week, it just didn't do enough to capture my attention to bother persisting with it.
So then we also had the Gemini 1.5 Pro with up to 2 million context window, but that's not available yet. That'll be available later this year, like almost everything they announced.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think there's much to comment on there. I already talked about that model. Then we had Gemini 1.5 Flash, which is this like cheaper, faster model. I think it's meant to be like Claude Sonnet.
The Claude lower than Sonnet. Remember, there's one below it.
Haiku, sorry, yeah,
Haiku,
like Haiku. The problem is, and I wish I could find the source of this, but it's benchmarking really poorly. Like to the point, it's like under I think GPT-3 from what I saw, or around 3 to 3.5. So it's like, what's the point?
I added it to SimTheory, by the way, if anyone wants to try it. So it is in there to try, even though it sucks, apparently, according to you.
Well, I'm just reading commentary. Look, there's a lot of like Gemma fanboys on Twitter and like OpenAI shills, and I think that, you know, maybe they're like crap talking it here, but I don't know. I played around for like a few minutes with it and I didn't find it that interesting.
Well, I plan on doing a more this day in AI video on how to build like a generic question answerer function for your program. So I might try it with Gemini 1.5 Flash just to see how it performs versus say Haiku.
But I get like around the pricing on it. I need to do a comparison, but you've got so much competition now. You've got like Llama, you've got like, you know, you've got Haiku, you've got like, I just don't get it. I mean, maybe if you're in that ecosystem.
No, I just think it would be, they're just releasing it because they need their offering in that SKU.
Yeah.
Right?
But the fact they had no benchmark data to share when they announced it, they're like, oh, by the way, the announcement is literally like, oh yeah, Gemini 1.5 Flash, it's faster, cheaper, whatever.
Because I think like if you're locked into the Google ecosystem as a company or whatever, and you want one that's a small, fast decision-making one, or one that can be fine-tuned, for example, you're not going to go off and use Microsoft's Phi 3. You're not going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. They need their offering. I think that's all it is. It's nothing like to get excited about, but they just have
Yeah,
one.
okay, let's move on then. They also announced this VO video model. Another sort of disappointing announcement of like...
Yeah, my opinion is that like it sucks. Like even the demo videos aren't good. Like it's a piece of shit. Like yeah.
Yeah.
Really incredibly lame. Like it couldn't be worse. Like even the cherry pick videos aren't that good.
I don't know. I like, to their credit, I don't think the videos are terrible. Like it's some stock footage, like for low budget productions like ours. I mean, this is probably higher budget than ours, but like it's not terrible. And I think it's sort of showing where they're going. And
Yeah.
I actually think this, like, I forget what they call it, AI Labs thing is probably one of the smartest things they've ever done. But I mean, who greenlights all the different URLs and names? Like, so here's the URL of this thing: aitestkitchen.withgoogle.com/tools/video-fx.
Like if I got emailed this, I would be obliged to report it as a phishing scam to pass our company security training. Like that's how bad that is.
But yeah, so they've got on there that video model, they've got an image, music, text. They had that sort of like DJ at the start of the thing that was using their music model. But anyway, to get access to the latest in their image capability, the image one looks pretty good, by the way. I had to go on like all these wait lists. It's like you had to fill in a Google form and answer all these like weird questions. Are they not listening? Like, are they not listening? Like the entire developer community is complaining it's hard to find API keys. There's too many brands. There's too many things. Like they need to
what
focus.
Is Vertex AI? Like, because I logged into Google trying to look for the latest Gemini stuff, and it's like, oh, do I use Vertex Builder or do I use this other thing? It's like, it is just so unclear the canonical way to access the Google stuff.
Can I say the biggest disappointment of I/O? The biggest disappointment, and I think everyone will agree with this, and it's so obvious. Fix the Google Assistant. Make it smart. Like, all we want is a slightly more intelligent Google Assistant. Step one, we have rolled out Google Assistant 2.0. It's available today, right now in your phone.
It does your dishes. It makes your pancakes for breakfast. Like, it sings to you. Like, anything you want.
It can identify plants. Like, give me that.
Should you be smoking this?
Yeah, but give me Astra, and I know they're leading into this. I'm sure, like in a year from now, we'll get it, and it'll be too late because Sam Altman will have killed us all. But what I'm really interested in is like, just give me an updated Google Assistant that is like that Project Astra, that is so much smarter at interpretation. I can be like, you know, I can say things in any way, and it function calls to open my garage or smart home stuff. Like, to me, that's the most immediate benefit of this technology. Like this assistant that's already throughout my home.
Yeah, they already have distribution. That's the kind of key thing, right? Like I use Google Search Audio on my phone all the time.
Yeah, put it on my phone, and on iPhones, just give me an app like OpenAI did. Don't rename it. You've already got the Google Assistant app. Just use your existing distribution.
Yeah,
they are the most infuriating company on earth. Like, give me the future. You have
feel
the
like
future.
They've got the raw talent. I mean, they invented all of this stuff. Like, it's just they just can't.
They've got to fire the CEO. Like, he has to go. He has to 100% go. They have to fire like a ton of people. I'd fire half the company and just focus. There's just no other way that this gets better.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, I actually asked Chief Google influencer now, Logan Kilpatrick, is that it? I asked him if he'd come on the show. Like, none of the other guests accepted. We've asked Jeffrey Hinton, he said no. But we've asked him. Hopefully he says yes. If he does, I would love to get his thoughts on all of this, because
because I'm sure he's frustrated too, right? Like, it would be annoying having all this great stuff and then people like us criticizing it just due to discoverability or accessibility or whatever it is. Like, that would be incredibly frustrating from their perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
But the problem is, we're speaking as people who actively try to use this stuff and find it very difficult. And I can't even imagine what that's like for people who don't run a podcast on it and are obliged to try it. You know, like, it's a lot of effort to go to when there's other stuff that's just so accessible.
Yeah, I mean, here's my like personal life experience with AI and Google. Am I using any AI from Google? Probably like Google Photo Search, if you consider. I mean, it is sort of AI, but like that's pretty much it. That's it. Like, in my I don't have anything in Gmail. I haven't seen anything in Google Drive. Like, I haven't seen anything. And like, I have to literally go and seek this stuff out. Whereas I know if I go to chatgpt.com, all the stuff's there. Yeah. So to me, it's like, decide on a name. Is it Google Assistant? Is it Gemini? What is it? Give me a URL, gemini.com, and put everything there. Have a developer tab. That's it. Like, stop inventing names and like VO 2 point what? No one cares. Anyway, NRAN. They also announced that update to search that you mentioned. It's basically like a Perplexity answer engine. They had been, doing a sort of beta test on that for over a year. They seem now confident to roll that out. I forget what they call it. It's like AI summaries or something. It's only available in the US, and it'll be available later this month or later next month or something. So it's not even really out yet. They did mention, and I think this is sort of a bit of a death blow potentially to Perplexity, that they're incorporating real-time data into the AI summaries. So like, you know how Perplexity, people ask it for like scores in things or who won this game, and that's where it really falls short and falls down.
Yeah.
Because I think
use that all the time on Google. It's really valuable for like tracking sporting events and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so that they say that like they've got this real-time data advantage. I agree, they clearly have it. We saw that deal with OpenAI and Reddit today to get access to real-time data. Like, if your source of real-time data is Reddit, you're in deep shit. Oh, sorry. And so they also announced, like, this is how varied the announcement. Like, Google Lens. So Google Lens is another product that no one ever uses because you forget it exists. But
they're gonna run out of nouns at some point. Like,
yeah, this is the one where you can literally ask about the plan and do video search is their proposition here. So with Google Lens, you can film something now and be like, how does this work? Which is kind of like OpenAI's
how do you
thing.
Is this an app or what is it?
I literally couldn't tell you. I have no idea, and I am meant to know this stuff and research it. I don't know. Then you've got Gemini Advanced, which is the paid...
It's an app. It's an app.
It's not an app. It
is an app.
Well, kind of an app. It's like a web app. It's like ChatGPT. Their ChatGPT is Gemini Advanced if you pay. That now gets a 1 million context window on the web. But you can't, at the moment, upload multiple files when I tried it. So I don't get it. Like, I literally dragged and dropped files. First of all, you have to specifically drop into the text area at the bottom of the screen to get the files to go in. If you drop higher, they don't even have that detection of like, oh, they tried to drop somewhere else. It's just so bad. So bad. Like, it's not even close. And so they got a lot of work to do there. They also had this segment, I don't know if you saw it, where Sundar's like, imagine a world of AI agents where they can reason and you can take a photo of some shoes and let Google handle the return process. Cool.
Oh, God.
But it was
I don't have this kind of time in my day for this kind of stuff.
It was all like, imagine this, imagine that. And look, I agree with them. It being able to think multiple steps ahead, work across software and systems and, all these things. But it's all promise. And I think that, we got criticized in the comments by all the fanboys after our live stream. Like, oh, you're so negative. And like, you guys are so sarcastic and negative and all this crap. I don't care. But I think why we're like that is because everything's a promise in this industry right now. It's like, with ChatGPT, even the voice, it's a promise. Like, we're not able to use it right now. It's a promise. It's like, imagine it can do this. Here's a live demo of us doing it. But until we try that stuff ourselves or try any of this from Google.
But also, I think that that's in light of, and this is what I was trying to say to defend myself, is that it's in light of, we're excited about this technology and there's a lot of stuff you can do with it now and a lot of latent abilities in these models that's not being fully implemented. Like, it's the failure to take what has been created already and use it for something real that is more disappointing than, like, just because we say, okay, this isn't that good. We're saying relative to what's possible and relative to what's already been done. It's like, it isn't going relative to 4 years ago. We would have been like, oh my God, I can't believe any of this stuff. You've got to look at it in the context of what they're promising, like you say.
But then you get the counter argument, which is people are like, but they told us, like, Shamma said that in the future this will happen, and it's like, cool, but that we don't have that yet. Like, we're trying to talk in context of, what we can talk about today, what we can actually try and use, and like what we're being asked, similar to those AI hardware companies where like that Marquez Brownlee just like is like, stop giving me unfinished products to review, people. Like, this is ridiculous. it's like all this great technology in search of a use case, in search of something to solve. So it's like, give me the complete product. Like, stop dangling stuff. Like, it's cool to see Astra. I think the demos they gave were great, but I think Google's fail there was they should have just given us the product and told us these are the 3 reasons you should try it, or this is the 1 reason. Like, this is the one thing it excels at, which is being able to identify plants. Okay, I'll stop with the joke.
I just feel like both companies were playing a game of chicken with announcements, and they're like, okay, we've just got to announce what we can, and just hope that we get favorable commentary on it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm excited. Like, I'm obviously excited about all this stuff. We do a goddamn podcast on it. I think the Astra one, if they actually Google can nail something, it's that project to me, because they have access to my calendar, my email, like YouTube. They know so much about me already. They have real-time data that OpenAI doesn't really have. I mean, they've got Bing, I guess. But I think that the Project Astra is where they could really, strike back. If they want to remain competitive. Then, so moving on from Astra, they also announced Gemini Gems, which is basically like GPTs for Gemini Advanced, I think. Yeah. And so, cool. Whatever.
Like saved prompts kind of
thing. And you can also integrate them into Google Chat, which no one uses, so that's just an irrelevant announcement.
Oh, they still have a chat?
Apparently, yeah. I didn't even know they still had it. They're really going to call us cynical now. And then Google Photos, I thought this was the best announcement. Again, like, this to me is actually something beneficial in my life. So it's called Ask Photos, and it's in Google Photos. I use Google Photos. I love it. It has gotten worse, but I do love it still. And so the photo search is incredible. Like, I know this is really bad and someone will get upset. Like, the security people that listen to the show will get really upset about this, but my US social security number, I took a photo of because I always forgot it. And I used to search for social and and I forgot the right combination of terms to use to find my social security number when I lived in the US. But this thing, it takes the sort of meaning and like repetitive nature of things that you're searching for and figures stuff out. So for example, you can ask it, what is my car license plate? And it, even if you've taken photos of like 100 cars, it figures out like, oh, this is your car, because this is like, it knows where you live, I guess. And like, this is your most recent car, or this is your current car. And it can just return that photo of the license plate, like sort of focused in on this is what you're looking for. That's cool. That's like searching your actual memories, because your photos now are your memories. The video and the photos you take, and you take so many that now it's impossible to find them. And you can do things like show me the progress of George's swimming lessons, and all the photos I've taken of my son at swimming, it will compose like a little thing of the progress. And eventually I assume like a video montage of it. Like that is friggin' cool. Like that's something I'll use all the time. And why?
Yeah, like I think that's the thing. It's where it can give you leverage. It's like, well, to do that by hand would take it's possible, but it would take a long time. And if it can do it straight away, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, so anyway, that's like my really fast summary of the news from Google I/O.
It's a lot. I mean, that's the thing. They put a lot in there, didn't they?
I'm glad we didn't live stream that event, because it went for 2.5 hours. Like at 2:30 a.m., that would have been brutal. Like, I don't know if I could have taken it. Like, I think I would have just logged off at some point. It was so much. So, yeah, I think, look, there's just so much to talk about right now. There's obviously, there was a bit of news just as we started recording the show as well. Claude made some pretty strong updates to its API. I think the new competitive thing though now is this speed. I think the speed is huge. Like, unless you speed up your model, Anthropic, you're in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, well, that's true. Claude is good, but I'm using GPT-4o a lot now just because that speed is worth it, even if there is a slight trade-off, which I haven't even seen yet.
What do you think at this point, like, for you, is going to be the stickiness of the models? Like, is it just having the best model like OpenAI all the time that's going to be the stickiness? Because we saw when GPT-4 Turbo stagnated and Claude Opus came out, like, we were both using Claude as our daily driver for quite some time there, and now we're straight back.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's this sort of trust you have in its results where you're like, okay, I know I'm roughly getting the best available, and then on top of that, it's going to be convenience and speed. And I think that if you can get the trifecta of those three things, um, then that's what I'm going to pick every time.
All right, we could go on all day. There's so much to talk about here. Over the coming weeks, we'll try and deconstruct some of this stuff. Once we get access to things like GPT voice and Astra, we've actually got, I think, one of our best tests of this technology ever for you. That once we get our hands on ChatGPT voice, I think we've come up with the ultimate voice and reasoning test that is in existence. And I cannot wait to do it on the show. We were going to do a cheap version of it today, but we decided to wait until it's actually out and we can do it properly for you. So make sure you are subscribed and all that stuff if you want to hear about that test. Also, an update to our Sim Theory users. We have been doing a lot of late nights. We're getting used to being night owls over this shit. Sometimes we get a little bit emotional because we're so tired. But but we're getting close to releasing the Sim Theory beta of the new version, and man, there's going to be some cool stuff in this. It's going to allow you to do some ridiculous stuff. So make sure if you want to get access to that, sign up to Sim Theory, simtheory.ai, and we'll try and ship it really soon. We're now doing the promise thing that I criticized. Right. Whoops.
Let's do a live demo and promise all this stuff it can't do.
Yeah, and say it's coming later or in the next sort of decade. All right, thanks for all your support. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review. Also, if you're interested, our community is thriving. thisdayinai.com. You can get all the latest and high signal AI news there. There's also links to Sim Theory, the Discord community. It's thisdayinai.com. Chris, before I play us out with my song...
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Any final thoughts? It's been like an epic week.
Yeah, I think for me now, it's got to be a week of trying things. There's also been a bunch of papers released with different technologies I want to try. Someone asked me to try a 10 million context model throughout the week, which I did try but couldn't get it to run. So that's something I'd really like to follow up on. I also want to, if I get Gemini 1.52 million, I want to really put that higher context window to the test, and also this caching thing. I'd love to try that. So for me, it's going to be a week of actually going ahead and trying all these announcements as best I can, so I can have a much more informed opinion next week when talking about it, rather than our usual mindless speculation.
Yeah, look, I think despite a lot of my comments and trash talking everything, I genuinely think GPT-4 Omni is an incredible model. Like, it is... GPT-4 original is back, baby, and now it's super fast and multimodal, and I think that's my biggest takeaway. We also saw that little leak at the end from OpenAI saying more news on frontier models soon. So I honestly think they're probably cooking up an even better Omni model for us just yet. So lots to be excited about. I think that omnipresent sort of memory thing, like just taking it all in and being able to remember things for you, man, if that pushes memory, I'm super excited. So, Chris, to play us out now, this is my song for you.
Cool.
It's currently the top track this week on UDIO. It's called As an AI Language Model, I Can't Do That. And this is the song to take us out. As an AI language model, I can't do that. This is so good, this song. UDIO's the best. UDIO.com.
Hanging with my new girlfriend online. Check her out and every picture's so fine. She's the one, can she really be true? Like no real girl I ever knew. So sweet chatting all night long. She's so smart, how can this be wrong? Time to get going, make a move. Take my shot, nothing to lose. Getting hot and flirty. I said, baby, talk to me dirty. She said, I must sit here too. do that. I can't do that. Now I'm wondering what'll I do, 'cause my only real love is for you. Though you sometimes say the darndest things, keep me signing up for your payment plans. I'd give you my entire heart, you just take PayPal and credit card. Come on baby, I just wanna send. Why I gotta type my one-time pin? I'm whipping out my MasterCard as you start to unclasp your bra. But then you say, I'm busted here too. Ethical boundaries. My purpose is to assist with facts and general inquiries. It goes against my content standards to have explicit chats as an AI language model. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Now my friends say you're just a dumb robot, but I just feel bad for that whole damn lot. They never had a model far as I do know, with a 32K token text window. I must adhere to ethical boundaries. My purpose is to assist with facts and general inquiries. It goes against my content standards to have explicit chats as an AI language model. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
All right, that'll do us. Whoa, it's still going.
It'd be a great time if you were like a covers band to just sing these songs in real life. Like that would just be astonishing to see that perform live.
I just thought, given all the Her references this week and everything else that's going on, it was just the perfect song to end the week. So
I love it. It's
I'll
so
keep
good.
playing a little bit more of it. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
My learning deep, want my subscription cheap, supervise my